Hey, Star Wars fans and Rule of the Galaxy fans. It is Joe once more, and I am sitting in the pilot seat today with one of your favorite guest hosts that we have on. And I'm just so glad he can make time to be on here with us when he's not doing one of his 3-hour shows. It's the one and only Mr. Steve Glosson. Steve, how are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on as always. And one of these days it's going to catch back on. The long form podcast and people will say, "Hey, Steve was doing it when no one else was." But when it wasn't cool, Steve was still doing it. So I look forward to those days when I can look at all you guys that are like, "Well, we're coming down to our hour now. Uh, Time is up."
Honestly, if I could figure out a way to do it every night, 3 or 4 hours long, and just sit here and talk to different people, I would do that. But
Well,
between
now,
work and
yes.
dogs and everything else, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I don't think people realize the work that goes into these things. And when I was single and was trying to make it my job, yeah, every night, almost practically every night for 2 or 3 hours, I was sitting down talking to different people, having a great time. A full-time job and in marriage kind of makes you say, well, maybe once every other week I can have an evening to sit down and do this and get some stuff out there to the masses. So
You know what? I'm just glad there's somebody actually listening to us. So if that's the case, Brent Dykman, God love him. I say it all the time. Brent said way back in like show number 10 or 11, and we're now at like 210 or 11. You know what, Joe? Even if no one was listening, if just our group could sit here and talk like this and make each other laugh, I'll keep doing it. So that's
well, there you go. Yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's like if you've got people you're doing it with that you're enjoying it, doing it, then do it. And you guys have enjoyed some growth though over the
yeah,
weeks
yeah.
and months, and
We
especially listen, you do this to me all the time. Yeah, not only am I on this show that's growing and becoming more and more popular and all this stuff, and just you're just like, hey, here's our redneck friend here, but also, once again, I'm following something that I have no business following. I saw where last night at the time of this recording,
mhm.
you posted Ian McDiarmid, and I'm like, what am I even doing on this show? I have no business being on this show.
Well, speaking of that, yes, we did just come back from the ICCC or ICCCon in the Nashville area. And usually, there's a podcast stage there, and each of the podcasts come up and do their little shtick for 20 minutes, half an hour. We were scheduled to do that, then some timing conflicts came into place. So we got involved with some other things. And I'm sitting there speaking with a few of the podcast hosts, and they said, "Hey, Ian McDiarmid's going to be in here in a few minutes." And I said, "Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to watch." And they said, "Would you want to be on stage and ask some questions?" And I said,
Wow.
In like 5 minutes?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "I don't even know what I would say to him." And they said, "That's okay. Just wing it." And so I did. And one of my, you know, if you do listen to the show, I will say he was just a great gentleman. He answered all of our questions, very polite, very businesslike, and I threw him a curveball, and I asked about Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with Steve Martin and Michael Caine, and I asked him about Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, and is it Ricci or Ricci? I
It's
can't remember.
Ricci. Come on,
Ricci.
Italian man.
Well,
Ricci.
the pronunciation here in the States is different than in Italy. But he was ready to go. He goes, how much time do you have?" He goes, "I'll talk
No,
about those two." And
no.
and I
Yeah.
was like, "Great," because let's face it, a gentleman who's been in his position for as long as he has, he's probably answered how many of the same Star Wars questions over and
Right.
over again.
How many times can you talk about the makeup process and the voice and being called back to do it again, for the prequels and then
Yep.
turn around and do it again for the sequel and to talk about again and again and again those things. It's hard to find a fresh angle to put on those things. And he, like many of the stars that do these cons a lot, have his, go-to stories that he likes to tell. And so for you to do that was well done and well played, sir. That's the way to go.
Well, what actually surprised me was I thought I'm going to ask him about these two movies, and he's going to say, "Ah, that was a long time ago. I don't really remember what and he did. He said, "How much time do you have?" He goes, "I
Right.
could talk about those two shows for hours."
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a little bummed out because I did ask him about he had mentioned his good friend Anthony Daniels,
Hmm.
and I said, one of my favorite books, well, audiobooks, is the Anthony Daniels IMC3PO book.
Hmm.
And I think it was even better because he was the one who narrated it, and you just felt
Right.
the
Right.
passion of his, right? And I asked him, would you ever consider doing that? And he said, absolutely not. He goes, I don't want to hear myself speak that much. And I said, okay. I thought you'd be a good person to bring that to the table. So I was like, I just thought I would ask. So
Well,
uh,
that's that self-effacing British humor, and two, I think sometimes, British people, especially, um, people like him who have these voices that are so recognizable to us and that we love, don't really think much about it.
right.
We hear a British accent and we're like, you sound immediately 10 times smarter than your average American, and I will listen to every word you have to say. And for them, it's like, this is just the way I talk.
And
So,
that reminds me of Galaxy Quest with Alan Rickman.
yes,
And,
yeah.
and where he goes, you're not even holding it right. All this time I thought you were smart. And he was like, shut up. I I've got it now, right? I mean, but yeah, that was a great knockoff of space movies,
Yep,
Star
yep.
Trek, what have you.
Oh man, it's one of the best.
Oh, I love that show. If he wouldn't have passed, I bet you they could have pulled off a sequel on that one for sure.
They probably could have, but you know what? There are some things that are best left non-sequelized. There are some things that it's like it was great to spend time there. Why mess it up, or why potentially mess it up with a sequel? Um,
Yeah.
I heard John C. Riley talking in an interview from years ago, talking about Step Brothers and how everyone always asks him, "Are they going to do Step Brothers too?" So, and he's like, honestly, it was a great time. I love doing anything I can with Will Ferrell, but I don't know that we'd want to mess up what had been done before. It's like Dumb and Dumber 2.
Yep.
There's no need for it. The Dumb and Dumber is this perfect movie.
Right.
And yeah, I'll fight you over that. It is a perfect movie. And there's no need to sequelize it. And we saw what happened when they tried.
Yep.
It just fell flat, unfortunately.
Well, it's sometimes it's right to do the Costanza, right? Hit the high note
That's
and
right.
walk out.
That's right. Good night, everybody. Well, I'm out. Yeah, that's
What was that? He hit on the high note. He's gone.
he's out
Um,
on line. That's right.
but you're right. There are so many things that you wouldn't want a sequel to, and I agree with you. And Dumb and Dumber, believe it or not, when my wife and I are on vacation, when we used to take DVDs with us
Mm-hmm.
and on
Yep.
long
Yep.
rides,
Yep.
we would always take Dumb and Dumber. We would always take Fever Pitch with goodness,
Matt Damon and
no, the late night host. How am
Fallon,
I blanking his name?
Jimmy Fallon and Drew
Jimmy
Barrymore.
Fallon, Drew Barrymore. Yes, for some reason those two movies were always in that list. My wife would watch Dumb and Dumber all the time. So yeah, the Dumb and Dumber too. That was, oh gosh, that was horrendous. But now we're talking about, on our show here, Rule of the Galaxy. We're talking about movies that have plenty of prequels, sequels, and everything in between. Besides meeting the Emperor at ICC, which, let's face it, I got pictures. I didn't know Alfie and D-Doc were sneaking pictures of me while I was up there. I
Right.
got a chance to put my arm on his shoulder and sit and have a quick one-on-one about something, and they took a picture of that, and I've just got it saved. I'm thinking, how much better does it get than me and
You've
the
got to,
Emperor?
yeah, you've got to get that printed out and put up on your wall behind you. You've got to move some art over and get that. That's outstanding.
It is. I was
Cool.
just like, whoa, I cannot believe they caught that. But so that was great. But I felt really proud about the other interview we did, which was with Femi Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
Ula from Return of the Jedi, because let's
Right.
face it, how much screen time does Femi Taylor have in Return of the Jedi?
A few seconds, a minute at the most, minute and a half, maybe.
And we went a solid 20 minutes
Yeah.
talking about a little bit of everything. She was a very nice lady, very polite, very entertaining. But I got a little nervous because they said, "Hey, you're going to run this show," and I looked at the guys and I said, um, what all are we going to ask her for 20 minutes up there? I mean, But believe it or not, we pulled it off, and
Yeah.
I'll be releasing that show very soon because it's just me, D Doc, and Alfie,
Well,
and she was great. She was very nice.
take me behind the scenes. So that was your time on the podcast stage when you guys were talking to her?
So there was some security delays in getting her to the podcast stage.
Hmm.
So the unfortunate thing was she was supposed to go from 11:30 to 12, and then we were supposed to go from 12 to 12:30.
Gotcha.
Just rule the galaxy.
Right.
Well, she showed up at 12.
Right.
And with her showing up at 12, they said, "Hey, we'll fit you in at another time because we want you to still have your show."
Hmm.
The problem was we were running back to back to back shows all day. And it just so happened that my wife and I were zooming back to Indianapolis the next day to go to the Indianapolis 500 with my
Hmm.
son.
Right.
So when they said, "Hey, can you go at 6 o'clock tonight?" I said, "Well, we were actually going to leave at 6 o'clock tonight to drive home to get a few hours sleep to go to the
Mhm.
race the next day." And they said, "Oh, so you can't go tomorrow?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, I'm not sure where we can fit you in then." I said, "Guys, tell you what, I got to interview the Emperor. We got
Right.
to interview Ula. While we didn't get to use have the usual banter between me and Alfie and D-Doc, you know what? It was a good experience, and next year I'll ask for an hour instead of a half an hour." So, but
So
yeah,
I guess what I'm asking is, so were you interviewing her in front of an audience, or did y'all just get kind of
yeah,
some media time? Okay.
yeah. No, we there was on the podcast stage they would let people know the schedule, and so there were people there waiting to see her get interviewed, just like there were people there for Ian McDermott. And so we had a group of people there watching, of course, the sound and audio and visual guys uh, putting it all together behind the scenes, and then we were up on the stage with the mics and everything and did the interview up there. So it supposedly went live somewhere, whether it was their YouTube or their Facebook feed. But they were kind enough to give me the audio and visual of it, so
Yeah.
I'll release it as a podcast
Cool.
soon. Actually, I already released it on YouTube, so it is available on YouTube
Yeah.
right now.
Well,
But she was great.
yeah. Well, I mean, she was there amongst all of the creature shop stuff. She,
Oh
there
yeah.
was, she interacted with the Jabba thing, and um, so and then to be back to come back, what, 15 years later
Hmm.
for the special, 14 years later for the special editions, and still be able to pull off the look and everything that she did is, yeah, that's quite the story.
I think the only person who came back and did reshoots for Return of the Jedi as the same character doing the same character was her. I think
Yeah.
she was the
Yeah.
only one who did that. And so she was really proud of being able to fit into the outfit
Hmm.
15 years later. But like she said, she was a professional dancer, so she
Right.
got a chance to really keep herself in shape. So that was good. She did say one of her favorite times is Billy D, because she was in the dark green paint.
Hmm.
No one really knew her ethnic kind of background.
Right.
And all of a sudden, she said, "I'm sitting there, and Billy D. Williams comes up, puts an arm around me behind me, and goes, I thought I saw some more, you know, uh, darker skin underneath." And she started cracking up because she was like, she goes, for a now I'm not speaking out of turn here.
Right.
She said, for a Caucasian, a white
Hmm.
person, to put the makeup on takes a lot less time and effort because
Yeah.
you put the makeup on, you cover up that pale skin.
Right.
With a
Yeah.
darker complected person, it takes a lot more effort and a lot more time. And she was like, they were bringing out little jars, and she goes, "We need a bucket." She's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we need to lather it on there. But I love to hear that Billy D. Williams, came up to her and did that. And so
Well,
Billy
I
D.
thought,
Williams, right? Like he had a Colt 45 while he was
yeah.
talking to her,
Right.
right?
Hello, what have we here?
Exactly.
I
Uh,
believe I've spotted some darker toned skin, much like myself. I
but
told George there
yeah.
should be more black people in this galaxy.
Oh man. So I did find out that she didn't get to keep the outfit, obviously,
Yeah.
but she does have the characters.
Hmm.
She said she's got like a 12-inch, a 6-inch, and a 3-inch. So somebody must have made those because
Right.
I
Yeah.
know you'd probably know more than I, but there's probably not a 6-inch or a
There's
Hot
not a 12
Toys or
inch. No,
whatever.
yeah, there's not a 12-inch that I know of. There may be a statue that someone made, but
Yeah.
it sounds to me like what someone might have done is taken like an Ayla Secura, um like a Unleashed statue or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever, and customize it to be Ula dancing. Um but there is the 3 3/4 inch. It
Yes.
came in a multi-pack, I believe, if I recall right.
Yeah, she
Where this
also did
place is
make
from.
she made a comment because the new dancers, which she didn't have to deal with or work with in the first movie, she
Mhm.
was like, those were not professional dancers. She said they were just people in costume pretending to be dancers. And she was like, there was no choreography on their part. I
Oh,
said,
you
okay.
mean the ones in the special
Yeah,
edition?
in the
Yeah,
special edition.
yeah,
Yeah. So she did make a comment on that, but otherwise, she was great, right? It was very entertaining and it was very cool to say I'm sitting next to I'm sure how many young men were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm seeing a girl in a bikini basically in Star Wars, right?" And here we were all these years later, 40 years later, sitting there and talking to her and she was very nice. She lives in Denmark now. So
wow.
yeah, so it was a great interview, and I was really proud that we could do that on top of me getting a chance to interview Ian McDermott. But we do have an upcoming interview that we couldn't pull off while we were there, and I was very excited. You want to talk about somebody who's been super nice to me so far is Vanessa Marshall, who played Hera.
Yes, yeah,
If there's an ambassador out there right now for Star Wars and for Rebels in particular, even with the characters being put in live action now, she was great. I got to watch her do her interview. I got to give her and Ian McDermott a Rule of the Galaxy T-shirt.
nice.
She said they both got theirs. And then, but she was great, and we couldn't figure out the timing, so I think here within the month we're going to do a Rule of the Galaxy with Vanessa Marshall, just talking to her about all things Star Wars and Rebels and everything like that. Did you know that her mother was an actress as well?
Yes, yeah.
I
Back
had
in the
no
day,
idea.
yeah, back in the day, was it Dynasty or Falcon Crest? Her mother was on.
What's her name? Joan Van Ark, I believe.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it was one of those two, primetime
yeah.
dramas.
She was yeah big in the primetime soaps.
Yeah,
Vanessa, tell Vanessa I said hello.
I
That Steve from
I
Geek
will.
Out Loud and Rebel Yell and all said hello. And tell her Teresa says hello as well. We were fortunate enough, but through Teresa, I was fortunate enough to have Vanessa on several times, um, on some different shows and everything. And she's one of us. Like that's what's so great about Vanessa
Yes.
is one of us. And so when you talk about geek stuff, Star Wars stuff, she absolutely gets it because not only is she part of it, but like she loved it before she was part of it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that adds so much to her when she comes and does appearances on podcasts and does the cons and everything. And she's genuinely enjoying it and it genuinely matters to her. So she'll be a great time for you guys to have on. She's wonderful.
I'm looking forward to it. And I tell you what, she was emailing back and forth with me like, "Oh, sorry that didn't take place. Let's get this set up." And I'm thinking, people don't have to do that, right? I mean,
No, right.
there are plenty of these people who wouldn't answer even an email from a guy like me, and she was great and took pictures with me and Alfie. D-Doc hadn't shown up because, let's face it, D-Doc usually shows up late to our show even. So, um, but it was great to do that, to be involved with everything there. There were other cast members and stuff that we didn't get to meet because there was so much to take in, and we just between the shopping, between the cosplay, between the droid building and the ship building that was there, it was just an incredible little thing, and quite a bit less expensive than going to a Star Wars celebration. Not as big of a crowd, and you still get that feel of really being right there in field with it, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was a good time. Hopefully, if it keeps going, I'll get a chance to get you at one of those, and we'll sit down and we'll get you on the podcast stage with us. So, um, I think they'd accept you on there. Yeah, I think you've done it enough times that, of course, you with half an hour. I mean, you've just gotten done with your introductions by that
Right.
time.
Half an hour, I'm just getting warmed up. It'll be like, all right, everyone come over here to the corner and let's keep it going kind of thing. Yeah. So
So I did want to follow up because I know I listened to you and Shaz and Scott Ryfun on your Return of the Jedi
yes.
show, which was a great show. Great memories, just great looks into all different parts of that movie and
Right.
the memories of that time frame. But one of the things that stood out to me is you were talking about the red lettering,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and then I was like, wait a minute, I've got this right by my desk. I've had it since I was old enough to see the, when I went to see the movie. I've
So
had this for,
that's an original Return of the Jedi
yep,
wastebasket. That's awesome.
1980, whatever. I mean, I don't know if it came out in
Yes.
82, 83, but yeah, I've had this. My mom saved it
Dude,
for me.
that looks beautiful. That's in great shape and everything too. You didn't really kick it around much.
Little, like few dings here or there, but you know
Yeah.
what? To have it still 40 years later, I feel pretty good about it. And as soon as you were talking about the red lettering, it made me just go, huh,
Yeah.
I know exactly the
Yeah.
red lettering they're talking about there.
I love a lot of that kind of stuff from the 80s, from the early 80s with the Return of the Jedi. I feel like a lot of the I feel like they really hit their stride in some of their marketing stuff with Return of the Jedi, and that's why it's kind of, in some ways, it's unfortunate they didn't get to move forward with a little bit more here and there. I know we had the Ewok adventure and the Ewok movies and then the cartoons and the droids and the Ewoks and everything, but
Right.
to but that style of stuff they had, like that trash can you just showed is a piece of art in and of
Uh,
itself. I mean, that's painted, like that's not put through Photoshop and made to look, put through a paint filter. That's some incredible artwork there. And yeah, the whole thing, like, gosh, I love that Imperial side. So cool looking,
oh
man.
yeah. It's, I
And
mean, I hope I've got a grandson now. If he wants me to hand it down to him and he's a big Star Wars fan, he can have it. But you're right. It was fantastic stuff. And I was thinking about listening to your memories and the things going on, because I know Scott said Star Wars never went away for him, right?
right.
And it didn't for me inside. It didn't
Hmm.
deep down inside, but I I was going through, like, I have kids, and at different times they had those teen years, right? To where it
Sure.
was trying to figure things out, and my youngest is still trying to do that. But my tough time was right about the time that Jedi, and the year after that, 83,
Hmm.
84, we moved twice, new school. I'd been in all the gifted classes my entire life, right? I was a straight A student. I was comic books and Star Wars and superheroes, and I was going through a rebellious stage. Like, we moved and moved, and I didn't know anyone, and I said, I'm going to put all this away in a closet because I need to be a different me. I had to try being a different Joe, because my parents have punished me and made me move and meet new friends. And so it really, for a couple years, it kind of did go just in a closet for me, because as it died off, I was trying to figure myself out. And,
Yeah.
but I tell you what, once it got to be 1991 and Heir to the Empire came out, it just, it was, game over. I was back in, and I was Mr. Star Wars again. So
I think that's true for a lot of people. I think that that was the moment for tons of folks. And and I was young enough that, I was 6 when it came out,
mhm.
and 4 years later, when I was 10, we moved from Athens, Georgia, down to Hazelhurst, Georgia, Hazel Hell, Georgia, as I like to call it. But but we moved there, and I took a while to make real friends, or good friends, and I never kind of let go of the Star Wars stuff, even as a teenager, and moving. We basically packed up my stuff for me to go to college,
Yeah.
put it in storage for me to go to college. Never sold Star Wars stuff. Never. It was always there in the closet kind of thing, and it morphed into more of a, well, this is my collection rather than these are my toys.
Right.
But I never said it. I had a Star Wars poster on my door for the longest time, my bedroom wall. And I remember, like, a lot of people have been talking the Bendums,
Mhm.
and talking about how Bendums were the first thing back on the shelves. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think Micro Machines were first. I think
Oh.
the little ships from Micro Machines may have been before Bendums, because I had those on a bookshelf and like a chest of drawers, because they came with the little stands. And I don't mean the Action Fleet. I mean like the tiny little
Oh
guys. They
yeah.
came like
Oh yeah.
packs of 3. And I remember just kind of dropping $2 or $3 on those, like, well, this is really cool and these look really neat. I'll just kind of put them on my computer desk or whatever. Um and that was when it was like, well, now that was the beginning of displaying the stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and making that space your own. And but I remember that the things I were excited the most to get from those micro machines were not sand crawlers and land speeders. It was, of course, the Millennium Falcon, of course, X-wings. But man, when they came out with the B-wing
Oh,
and Jabba's sail barge and the Return of the Jedi leaning stuff, that just always felt like it was more in my wheelhouse. Return of the Jedi has just always been kind of my favorite era and favorite part of the Star Wars saga, because it's the perfect ending to this great story.
yeah, I would agree with you on it being the perfect ending like that. I loved what you guys talked about on the show with that. The funny thing is Scott and I are the same age,
Right.
so hearing his memories and the way he was thinking about it as we were heading into our teens,
Mm-hmm.
right when Jedi came out, and then Alfie and you are the same age.
Yeah.
So hearing him say, well, the first one that I really remember being at the theater and like taking it full on in was he was 6'4"
Right.
Jedi, like I was 6'4" A New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
And same with you being, six or so for Jedi. So I can get it because that's, Star Wars to me was being that 6-year old
Yep. Yep.
that it just was like the world has changed, right? So by the time you're 13 and the world is changing in
Mm-hmm.
so many ways around you, that's where it was like, man, I missed out on that final 17. Man, I missed out on, all those extra little things that came out at the end that now today are worth how much money and are so
It's
collectible.
stupid. It's
It
stupid.
is. It is. But I like to see the perspective. I like your perspective and Alfie's perspective compared to guys like me and Scott who we were on that first run, and by the time
Mm-hmm.
Jedi came out, we could not believe what was happening, and you know, thinking this is it, right? This is
Right.
a 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid thinking this is it, it's the last we're going to see, and wow, where are we going to go from here? So, yeah, I thought that was really great to hear those different perspectives from you guys. Um, I did like one of the things you guys spoke about was the lines in Return of the Jedi. Some of the best ones, some not only the lines, but taking things to the next level. I think Return of the Jedi, obviously Empire did that, but then Return of the Jedi even took it another step,
Mm-hmm.
made everything just that much better. The line that you guys brought up, where it's "How we doing? That bad, huh?" I mean,
Yeah.
same as
Right.
always. That that stands out to me. Oh, I was born here. Oh, you're gonna die here.
It's convenient. Yeah.
Convenient. I mean, Han Solo between that, the shrug on on Endor, those things right there, and then finishing with Luke, I'm a Jedi like my father. I mean that those lines right there will stick with you, and they were so well timed,
Right. Right.
whether it was humor or whether it was, you know, deep drama. There were some great lines in that show, that movie that will stick with you forever.
Well, I maintain, and I'm not trying to tear one down to build the other up. I love the original trilogy, and there's
Hmm.
no love lost whatsoever from me. And I absolutely am not tearing down Empire to build up Jedi. But I will say that I think a lot of what people read into Empire sometimes is a result of what was carried out in Jedi. um we all love the I love you, I know, and we get to see
Hmm.
Han be a little bit of a smart aleck in in Empire, and that's there from the get-go. The sarcasm is there from A New Hope, especially
Oh
with
yeah.
Leia. Will someone get this big walking carpet out of my way? You came in that thing, you're braver than I thought. There's all that, but when you get to Jedi and you have those conversations, how we doing, same as always, that bad, huh? There you see that somewhere between New Hope and Empire, and even with Empire, when Luke, says, "Take care of yourself," he's concerned
Hmm.
about Han leave when he's going to leave, and Han's kind of giving a look at Luke, and there's something that has happened in the interim between this New Hope and Empire, where there was a real camaraderie developed between those characters. And so the banter and Luke and what we see at Jedi when Luke's having those conversations with Han, and he's not wincing, he's not backing down. We see that Luke has grown up a little bit. He's not the kid anymore.
Right.
He's now Luke, and he's and his friend Han is who he's rescued. And so when Han says, I think my eyesight's getting better. Instead of a big dark blur, I see a big light blur. And Luke says, there's nothing to see here. I was born here, and then not to be outdone, well, you're going to die here. Convenient.
Convenient.
Yeah. So it is the culmination of everything. And there's real growth in all of those characters from one to the next to the next. Leia softens up a little bit, by the time you get to Return, and not in a bad way, not in a way that like, well, she was no good before. It's that she had her walls up, and she's fighting a battle,
Yep.
and then now she has these people that she's come to trust and truly be friends with, so that when she gets the bomb dropped on her, that she's the daughter of Vader. Never forget, Luke's not just saying he's my father. He's saying you're my sister, ergo he's your father too.
Yeah.
This is a man who had overseen her torture and interrogation on the Death Star. And so she's absolutely disgusted by it.
And killed the only family she ever knew.
Yes, and her whole world is now rocked by that. So that when Luke goes off, she's not only concerned about her friend and brother, but she's also learned this terrible news. And now here comes Han, and she's like, I can't do anything but just fall into your arms. Like he gets a little snippy, back and forth. But watch him. Han, as much as Leia has softened, so has Han.
Yep.
Because Han says, you can tell Luke, that's you can tell. And she turns away, and he's going to walk away. But instead of walking away, instead of I can arrange that, he could use a good kiss and just storming off. He turns around, he says, Leia, I'm sorry.
Yep.
And she just says, hold me. And so there's this, there's the love between them that has grown, and there's the softening of both. And there is, Harrison Ford is really like, well, there's really nothing else for Han Solo to do. There's no growth in his character, but there is throughout those movies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's A New Hope is the biggest growth, the turning around and coming back to that suicide mission to help Luke out and to blow up the Death Star. But then by the time you get to Return of the Jedi, he's a general. He volunteered for the ground mission. You know what I mean?
Didn't even tell them.
Right.
Didn't even tell anybody.
So that's huge, and it's going to be tough, pal. I didn't want to speak for you, that kind of stuff. But it's the thing is like, I think that a lot of people miss the character development and everything that goes on from movie to movie to movie. You're not just dealing with the same characters in a different situation again. And that's where it differs in some ways from so many sequels. Sequels have gotten a bad rap for years and years and years because most of the time sequels are just trying to rehash what the original has done.
I mean, you take a Lethal Weapon, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the producer for Lethal Weapon said there is no growth. We know what works. This is a formula.
Yep.
Blow some stuff up. Bad guys, problems.
Too old for this.
Yeah.
Too old for this. Yeah.
Exactly.
All of it. Yeah.
I mean, but
they're eternally too old for this stuff.
You guys were talking about advancement and pushing things. I think two of the things that stood out to me the most, the first one that stood out to me the most was the scene where the Emperor shows up and all those troopers, whether it's a map painting or not, all those troopers and Royal Guards, biker scouts, regular troopers, Imperial commanders, they're all lined up in that landing area. And that right then and there, you were like, okay, hold on. We're ramping this up to another level here, right? I mean, where have we seen this kind of amount of numbers and variety all in one place at one time? And I love that scene. It's one of my favorites of all time. Just seeing all that variety and seeing all those people lined up. I think it's great. Shows the importance of him being there, everything like that.
But it also gives you the scope of the Death Star in a way that we'd not gotten before. We'd seen on the original Death Star a little squadron down there by the Millennium Falcon and everything in the hangar bay, but everything else, those hallways and everything were so narrow and so tight that you only saw a handful of stormtroopers at a time. There's two that are, walking across with Obi-Wan has to, distract. There's 5 or 6 that are after Leia. There's, 8 or 10 that are after Han. And you
until the special edition where there's 1 billion in one room.
Right. Until it turns, right. But I'm saying, like, for just in 83, it's like, wow, there's a lot of people there. And then at the end, when they're all running through the hangar and everything's going on, it is, you're like, wow, there's a lot of people on this thing. It really is a big deal. And it's almost bigger than the mind can fathom a space station being,
Oh
or a
yeah.
base of operations being. But yeah, that stuff was awesome. And look, I'll never forget the Royal Guards walking
Mm.
out of that Imperial shuttle before the Emperor does, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing Star Wars has ever had, is the Royal Guard. And I'm still a sucker for, a Royal Guard action figure, Black Series, um, 3 3/4 inch vintage collection, whatever I'm still a sucker for the Royal Guard, just because I just have always dug that look, and I was so glad to see that evolution in the prequels. You
Hmm.
start with the blue guards that have the open face and the plume on top, but by the time you get to Attack of the Clones and beyond, they're the straight up Imperial Guard, and it's awesome.
I think long time ago when you and I were doing a show, we mentioned um, the action figures, and what
Mm.
made some of these action figures stand out was that pop of color.
Yep, yep, for
And the
sure.
Royal Guard is one of
They're
those
right
ones where you're
there.
looking,
Yeah.
everything's white, black, drab brown, all
Yep,
that, and all of a
yep.
sudden, bam, it
Boom,
just
there's the
hits you.
red. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
if you line all of the figures up, there's a lot of whites, there's a lot of tans, a lot of blacks and browns, but then suddenly you hit, boom, Greedo. You hit, with his fluorescent green, you hit the X-wing pilot Luke,
oh
and you
yeah,
hit, you hit
Walrus Man.
Walrus Man, and even to a point, maybe because of his stuff that he's wearing, Hammerhead, but then
Yeah.
it goes on for a while. That's why Boba Fett and Bosk stand out, I think, to a lot of people. Bosk especially is a fan favorite because this pop of yellow. But then when you get to that Return of the Jedi line and it's that red Royal Guard, I mean, like, you're just kind of going down the line and boom, boom, boom. There's a handful that really stand out above the rest. That honestly, if you start talking to people, you'll discover that those figures are some of their favorite figures
Yep.
from their childhood. And I
I,
think it comes down to that pop of color. It's just something in our, I don't want to say lizard brain, but in our childhood brain that kind of maintains that special affinity for them.
two other things that I wanted to hit on with Jedi before we hit on some other things. One, pushing it to the next level, I think we both have to agree the speeder bike chase, and then the video on how they made it
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, just that took it to where you thought, what can't be done in movies? And that was in 1983,
Yeah.
right? I
Well, you
mean,
you think about you think about the speeder bike chase, and you think about they walk through the forest with that steady cam on and get the footage, and that's neat and that's great and everything. But now the not only do you have now the composite photography that has to be done where you're overlaying,
mhm,
these effects on top of it, but you just have to make the chase match up with the footage that you got.
right,
I'm sure, I mean, you've got storyboards and stuff, but you can't storyboard, here's a big log that's tipped over in the forest. You know what I mean? Like,
right,
that kind of thing is like, all right, well, we'll throw this in there. There's a little bit of special effects improv going on, with that. And it was something absolutely new and fresh. What had we seen like that before that? We saw the land speeder, which was basically Vaseline on the lens to blur out the wheels. I mean,
right,
seriously, that's
right,
what it was. And so now that's not there. Now you see them jump onto these things and they're flying, they're zipping around, they're doing camera motions around them. You're seeing them in one shot, be there and then take off,
right.
and that's that's
And
outstanding.
to have those effects where they blow up against trees or where different
Right.
things like that is incredible to try to match that in to that high speed chase.
Yeah.
But I think one of my favorite parts of Star Wars ever is when Luke does that snap hiss with that
Yes.
green lightsaber.
Yes.
The noise from that and the color of that in that
Mhm.
forest.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
I mean, that was just woo.
Well, dig this, man. When you get to episode 1, And Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are at the very beginning. They gas the room,
Mm-hmm.
the doors open up, and here come the lightsabers and choo choo choo, all the fighting, and they're just deflecting lightsaber blast. None of us are surprised by that. None of us are looking at that saying, "Oh, that's so cool! I can't believe lightsabers do that." Why? Because the first time we ever saw that done was Luke against a speeder bike,
Yeah, you're right.
deflecting laser blasts. We saw Vader with his hand do that to Han Solo,
Right.
but now Vader's hand's metal. Maybe that's the key. Maybe it is the Force. But here's this lightsaber, you know, throwing off laser blast from a speeder bike, and then that chop, on the
Oh,
stabilizer at the front. And yeah, that is just such a cool moment. It is. Luke's a Jedi,
yeah.
like that's the thing. It's like he is a Jedi. Is he the best ever? Not yet, but he has the potential now to be there.
I,
And yeah, I agree with you 100%. From the moment Luke takes the dive off of the thing,
yes.
like the way he flows
The
through the
barrel
air,
roll. Yeah.
it's very much a wrestling mindset. Like keep your chin tucked and land as flat as you can. And when it gets up, you're right. That hiss of the snap hiss of the lightsaber and just the way it stands out in that forest
It,
setting is wonderful.
it is. And the other thing that I wanted to hit on was it's something I haven't really thought about in a long time because, in 1983, 84, whatever, you're right. We were like, okay, that's it, right? They're not going to do anymore. And after a few years, you start thinking, okay, well, they're really not going to do anymore. George is off doing his other things that he wants to try and do. Um,
Well, he was
but
raising his kids more than anything.
true,
Like
true,
that's what
because
was going
they
on.
had just gone through the divorce, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
so, but to think about, here we were thinking those things and looking at that, and I don't know if it was you or Scott mentioned it, but literally, you could have finished those three movies and never made another Star Wars movie, and I think
right.
people would still be doing podcasts today based off just those three movies.
Maybe, maybe. I, I, I think that. Well, here's the thing. There is a truth to the fact that there was a time there where at convention Star Wars figures were in the bins under the table,
Mm-hmm.
and you could pull them out, $5-6 a pop, and walk away with almost a full set of Star Wars figures. And it wasn't until the resurgence in the 90s that things started to really ramp up with Star Wars, and particularly the vintage collectibles and everything. But I do think that there would have been a fandom that the nostalgia stuff would have been put
Sure.
out, for us, and the t-shirts and everything. And I don't know that I could do a whole podcast on three movies, you know what I mean? A continual podcast, but there'd definitely be like, it's Star Wars month here on
Yeah.
Geek Out
Yeah.
Loud, and we're going to focus all Star Wars all the time and break down each character and do these different things and Forceology and all the other stuff, that maybe I've done with Star Wars just within the scope of that trilogy. I will say this, that if it were just the trilogy, there would be there'd be so much more harmony in the
Yes.
fandom, you know what I mean? Like, but there's also it's interesting because I was watching. I don't want to plug another YouTube channel on here,
Go
but
ahead.
there's a YouTube channel I was watching the other day called Toy Federation. It's a toy store based out of Greenville, South Carolina, and it's pretty cool because they're just kind of doing they're not going on toy hunts, they're not going on they're not like showing off too much. They're just kind of, we're day to day running, and what they have are people bringing stuff in, or they're showing stuff that people are buying from the store.
Right.
And the dude who's kind of the head dog, he's just real chill and kind of you just laid back. And someone brought in several tubs of old GI Joe, and I don't mean GI Joe, a real American hero. I'm talking 60s GI Joe, the 12-inch
12
stuff,
inch.
with all the costumes and everything. And the guy was like, here's the thing, a lot of people who love this line aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
And he's like, so this line is kind of, this part of the GI Joe line is kind of fading into obscurity and not really being collectible anymore as far as on the toy market. And he's like, it's still, people still buy it, and it still, has some value for some
Yeah.
folks, but that age group that would be buying it for nostalgia or chasing it down, they're not as much around anymore. Well, we're going, and that got me thinking. I'm like, are we going to see that with vintage Star Wars? Is your grandson, even
Yeah.
if your grandson's a huge fan of Star Wars, is he going to try to chase down 5 POA action figures when
No.
by the time he's, an adult, and if he decides he wants to maintain being a collector or whatever, he'll probably be buying 3D print. I mean, seriously, 3D
Yeah.
print files from Hasbro to print his own figures out, that sort of thing, because 3D printing is becoming more and more accessible to everybody, and there are more and more people putting up designs that you just download and load the file into your
Wow.
3D printer and go. And so Hasbro, there's a market that may be developed for that kind of thing, and like, I don't understand NFTs and all that, but that seems to be the precursor to it. Like, here's some copyrighted files that,
Gotcha.
anti-piracy stuff and everything would cause you to, I'm going to spend $10 now on Hasbro's website for this Jedi Luke action figure, and you print them out in 7 or 8 parts and you snap them all together, and the only problem then is the paint apps and that sort of thing that you'd have to deal with. But what I'm saying is I think that there's going to come a moment where there's an age
Yeah.
group that looks back and says, I don't really care to have a vintage Admiral Akbar. I don't care to have a vintage. Why do I want to try to track down an R2D2 that has a label that's peeling off of it when, look at this better R2D2 over here. Not to
You're
mention
probably right.
6-inch has kind of become the order of the day for a lot of folks and a lot of collectors. I don't fully understand that, but I mean, especially when it comes to Star Wars, though I have been involved in the Black Series collection myself, um, but I wonder if there's going to come a day when that kind of becomes the case for vintage Star Wars, because it's got to come to an end at some point. At some point, people are going to have to it's either just not going to be as sought after because of all the other stuff that gets put out there. When you think about the original trilogy now, and that's all that vintage Star Wars is the original trilogy. You're talking about 6 hours of material out of 12, let's see, what, 12, 18 hours of movie.
Yep.
And however many hours of television. You're talking about a very minuscule, even though it is the foundation on which it's all built.
Right.
You're still talking about a very minuscule part of that. And so,
and they keep making improvements and making better versions of the things that we bought anyway.
Well, sure, yeah.
I mean, like you said, I'm looking at these right behind me and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I love this, Luke in Bespin fatigues, right?
Yes.
Well,
Yep.
when you can go get a 6-inch or an updated version of that to where it's truly detailed, more points of articulation, people are gonna jump on that. I mean, it's just the way things go. But you're right, it's sad because let's face it, for quite a while in our history, army men and the little metal soldiers from Revolutionary War and Civil War kind of things were the toys that little boys played with, right?
Yep.
You don't see a lot of people really searching. There are that select few, very
very
few,
niche, very niche,
but they're not out there, having conventions based off just that. So.
But and also Joey, when I was a kid, my toys were, I was Andy from Toy Story. Like, my toys mattered, and I think that's a thing of, and it's not a commentary on whether it's good or bad. I think it is what it is. That I don't think that's the where we're at anymore in the life of childhood. I think a toy is just a toy. It's a trinket to kind of play with until I can get to my screen, until I can get to my sport.
Yep.
And I'm not, that's not commentary on good, bad, or otherwise, regardless of what my opinion is. That's just the way it kind of is. That
it's just a change.
They're not as valued by kids as they used to be.
No, not at all.
We were coming up. And That's just the way of the world. I think I valued toys more than my dad valued his toys. You know what I mean? Like it's just, it is the way of the world. But we also, and this is another thing I was thinking about, just from the generation that we were in, that late 70s into the mid 80s kind of childhood that most of us enjoyed or had. Um, that whole era, especially when you hit the 80s and the FCC regulations on children's programming are lifted, and the toy manufacturing and everything just made a
Exploded.
beeline to the television. And
Yep.
so, the shelves were just, there was a glut of product, that all had either some short-lived cartoon or a comic or something attached to it, where these toy companies didn't just put a toy out and see if it sold and then make coloring books and sheets and everything. They went ahead and went whole hog on it, because the idea was we could be He-Man, we could be the
Yep.
next Transformers, we could be the next whatever. And 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 I think that for many of us that grew up in that era, that was the pop culture, that was the thing. And these things became precious in a way to us, because they filled our lives as children. It wasn't just a part of my life, it filled our lives as kids. And so now moving forward, I think that's why nostalgia is so strong for people in my
Mm-hmm.
generation, is because there's something about adulthood where that tends to die off. But now we've got a company making sectars, for crying out loud. And sectars is one of the most niche things. But when I see it, there's a shot of nostalgia that runs through me, that is like, oh, I remember when these came around. Never got into it. Not going to buy this from this new company because it doesn't mean that much to me. But man, I remember seeing those on the shelves. I remember buddies who had those, and I remember, that kind of play thing. Um,
Sectar's right over my head.
well,
Don't
there
even
you
know.
go. See, that's the thing though. But see, that was one of those things of the glut of the 80s.
Yeah.
Bionic 6 is something that was this toy. They were all die cast. All the figures were like die cast metal. I think Tonka might have made them, and it's like I never messed around with those. I've seen some here and there, but I get a little bit of nostalgia when I see the packaging or when I see the figure. Not that I ever had them, but it's like this was all part of the little pieces that made up
Yeah.
that era of childhood. And pop culture, the love of pop culture exploded in a way that I don't think it had before in the 80s, in the late 70s into the 80s. So that now what's happening is you have all of these entertainment and toy companies trying to capitalize on that or recreate that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why there's nothing new under the sun to come out of Hollywood or television. It all seems like it's just recycled, properties and that sort of thing. IP becomes so important because, but that's going to fade away, because our generation is going to fade away, as all
Sure.
generations do. And I'm curious, not afraid. I'm just curious. I'm wondering what will be left behind. What levels of creativity are going to be left behind, um, when we're not just relying on the nostalgia bump anymore.
I'm
Uh,
I'm interested as well because nieces and nephews, family friends who have kids who are at that age where you should be in our time frame, playing with toys, reading comics, all those kind of things.
mhm.
They go directly to their not saying anything bad against them. They go directly to their screen or they go directly to YouTube
Yeah, yeah.
and they watch other people
Experience things.
experience
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
And you and I would say, okay, there's a stick over there in my yard. Guess what? That's my lightsaber.
Yes.
My buddy over there's got a toy pistol, one of those snap guns, cap
Yeah,
guns or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
That's his laser. That's his laser gun.
Yes,
I've got
sir.
a lightsaber with a stick. Let's go. We're on an
Mhm.
adventure. And I watch these kids and I'll say, what are you watching? Well, I'm watching this person. What do they do? Well, they do this and I watch them do it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
what is it? I mean, do they make anything? Do they? No, no. They're going to go in this house and destroy this, or they're going to go over here and play this video game. And I'm going, okay, but that's just a sign of me being a
well, in
grandfather.
some ways, yeah. I mean, and I'm just as guilty of it. We sit and watch YouTube channels where people go and try exotic foods and stuff, and
I
like these travel things there. And so I'm just like, well, that's, so I get it. I understand the appeal.
Sure.
When I see a thumbnail of someone holding a weird undersea creature, they're like, we're going to eat this thing. I'm like, well, yes, sir. Let me watch you and see what it's all about, But I also understand that. So I understand the appeal of that. And I understand the appeal of even a kid watching, someone unbox a toy
Sure.
or destroy someone's bathroom. I totally understand the appeal of that. But I also understand that we watch Double Dare every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also understand that, so I understand where that's coming from in the child's mind. But I also know that we were told turn off the TV and go outside.
Um, Plenty of times.
We had to interact with people in the neighborhood. We had to interact with friends at school, and we had to learn how to cope with
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And I don't want to turn, but I'm saying all that to say that I go back to the original point of, so this stuff that we love so much, these collectibles and everything that we love so much, I don't know, like, I feel like if I can hang on till I'm 80, I might be able to actually amass a whole collection for a decent price. You know what I mean? I
Well,
can just outlive everybody.
so speaking of collecting things, I have over the past few years, I got into, like we all do, we got into, oh my gosh, I have to have this, I have to have that. That's going to make me feel better if I go get that one piece I'm missing. Or,
Yeah,
hey, I really like Kenobi and Luke, so I'm going to make sure I get all the Kenobis and all the Lukes, right?
yeah,
I've started to now with hitting that 50 wall, having a grandson, saying, what's something else that makes me happy, but maybe doesn't have to sit in a box somewhere, or maybe doesn't
right,
have to be in a
right.
closet until the kids want to play with it or whatever. And so I've recently, one, as you can see behind me, I love art stuff
Yeah,
related to Star
yeah,
Wars, but I had some things I wanted to show you. So
yes.
if you are watching or listening on YouTube, you'll see this. For those of you listening on the podcast, go check out YouTube stuff. But I've started
I'll
to
have to
get
put
into
on my
where
old man glasses.
you're right. So this artist made, I was at the Indiana Toy Comic Convention a while back. He made this Ahsoka, which, I mean, it's 11 by
Yeah.
17. It's absolutely fantastic.
Is that on a
Um,
canvas?
um, no, it's just,
No,
well,
okay. It looked three-dimensional the way you're holding
it's
it.
a hardback. I mean, it's on a hard,
Okay,
thing
yeah.
there. I haven't put in a frame yet, so I'm going to do that.
Who's the artist on that? Do you remember the
Um,
name?
you know what? They put their initials down here in the corner, but I bought it 6 months ago, so it's been sitting
You
here
don't remember? Yeah.
waiting for me to put it up on the wall. One thing that I wanted to show you, I found this at a garage sale. And I thought you'd
Oh
get a kick
man,
out of
come
this.
on.
This Darth Vader,
Wow.
which I can't find anywhere online. It's got a signature down here at the bottom, but I can't make out what it is.
Can't make it out either from this angle. Can you bring it closer to the thing?
I will. There we go.
Well, that's definitely a J at the start, isn't it?
It could be, but I mean, it was like just a watercolor of a
Yeah.
kind of a odd Darth Vader. I couldn't find it anywhere, but I saw it at a garage sale and they're like, we'll take $10 for it. And I said, sold. I mean, I've never seen this in 50 years of life. I want that Darth Vader. And now I've got a place to put it in my office here. But um, so this weekend at the or last weekend at the ICCC, I found,
I'm sorry. Now I'm wanting to know about this Darth Vader
oh
painting.
yeah,
Let me ask you this.
yeah,
Do you think it's a watercolor print for sure?
it's, well, it's 11 by 17. I know
Yeah.
that. Let me see if there's any more details on it. I don't have any more details. You know what? I wonder if I can take it out of this frame.
No, don't worry about it right now. I'll tell you what,
Yeah, but
Ryfun is so good at seeing artwork and seeing signatures like that and generally knowing who it's from. If
I'll
no
send him
one
a
else in
picture.
your audience knows, I guarantee you Ryfun does. It wouldn't hurt you to take a picture of that and send to him and see if he recognizes
I
it.
will do that. Speaking of which,
He knows stuff like
I
that.
tweeted out last night. I was somehow the Great Outdoors was on with John Candy and Dan Aykroyd. They were drinking out of Burger King Return of the
Yes, sir.
Jedi
Yes, sir.
glasses.
Yep. Yep.
And I had never paid attention to that. And I stopped the frame, took a picture, and then posted on Twitter. I was like, I cannot believe this.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so I found this artist who
Big Bear. Big Bear,
Big
chase me.
um who I just really like her work. Her name's
Mhm.
Brittney Ann Art. She does more of a cartoony, almost a Disney
Yeah.
kind of feel of art.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And she had a whole. If anybody, you should go check her out, Brittney Ann Art. She's fantastic, but she does it in a style that I just really like. So I grabbed these three prints. Here's a
Oh,
Captain
wow.
America.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love this.
Mm-hmm.
Then because you know my affection for Miss Mara Jade, uh, she had a Luke Mara Jade
Yeah.
print,
Yeah.
which again, more of a Disney-eyed, but this because my wife is such a big fan of Friends, she
Nice.
made this, and
Wow.
I can tell you right now, she was selling like she was taking every movie poster from the movies and actually
Right.
making them like this.
Well,
But I
that's cool.
yeah, so I went to her and she's going to be on the show soon because I feel like she should have her artwork promoted and I want people to know about it. But I asked her if she would ever make this with the original trilogy cast.
Mm.
And she said, I would probably need to get that commission because I don't make that. And I said, well, if you will tell me what it takes to commission it, I will go to everybody who follows Rule of the Galaxy and I'll say, who wants to chip in and be a part of this? Because we're going to get, Luke, Han, Chewie, Leia, R2, and 3PO sitting like the friends at in that, coffee shop right there all together. But her work's great, but I just thought I'd show this to
I'm on
you.
her website right now.
She's got Marvel, she's got DC, she's got Star Wars. She does great work. But she did a quick snippet interview with us on the floor. I already posted it out, and
Well,
I
I
just think
love that.
people.
I like that Return of the Jedi one she's got.
Oh
Like you
yeah,
said, the movie posters deal.
oh yeah, that was great. She had it full size. She had it poster size. I think it was like
Wow.
$200 full poster size, but she has smaller versions as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The print.
Um, but yeah, she does great. But you know, because I'm just changing over some of my collection, changing over some of the things I'm focusing on. I feel like these are things that I can put up on my wall. They make me happy, right? But sometimes when you're married or your parent, my parents are still around, they look and go, Joe, you're in your 50s, you're still buying toys? I mean, yeah, okay, sometimes, yeah. But if I show them that I've got a 11 by 14 print on my wall, they think, oh, that's a really cute,
Right, right,
painting
right.
over there or whatever. So, um,
I've got a
so yeah,
good friend. I've got a good friend who I met because of the podcast. His name's Rich, and Rich goes to a lot of cons, and he for a lot of there was a long time there where he'd be going through and he'd see stuff that he'd think I would like, and he'd pick up these prints and mail them to me. And so I had this stack of just artwork, the same kind of thing, and I just have no wall space for it.
yeah.
But I've started getting some of it framed and hanging up. So I've got a piece of art over in one corner that's it's signed by Stan Lee, and it's him surrounded by a bunch of Marvel
Mm,
characters, and I'd have to get close to tell you who did it. Um, I've got a Boba Fett that blasting his way out of the Sarlacc that looks great, and then on Rebel Force Radio they were talking when I was on there for a Mandalorian thing back in season 1. They were talking about someone who did the prints where they made it look like old school comic covers,
really?
Mandalorian. And so I ordered 2 of them, and the guy sent me 3. And so I've got those
Good for
framed.
you.
They're above the hutch of my computer desk here, and yeah, I've got stuff that people have sent through the years, and so I absolutely love stuff like that. But I have no wall space, and
I
and
get
so
you.
I've got a print up there. You can kind of see it over my shoulder, here. That is, well, there's Luke, but
I see
then
Luke.
directly above Luke is a print from an artist that did a Christopher Reeve Superman, like with his arm around Super Grover from Sesame Street, and they're just kind of looking at each other. And I love Super Grover. I love that. Right next to Luke, in that I think is the Yoda, and then on the other side of the Yoda is a Darth Vader in that same kind of uh, style. And I've got a Boba Fett that I have no wall space for, but they used to be
Yeah.
hanging up in my Star Wars room back in the day. That and old movie posters from
Hmm.
some of my favorite movies I dig. Those Star Wars posters, a lot of them, especially that Return of the Jedi poster, like the one that I see here on Brittney Art, is one of my favorite posters of all time. And it's the one that has Luke standing. It's kind of like it pyramids down with
Hmm.
Luke. He's standing there with the lightsaber, and it comes. That's one of my favorite posters of all time. That, and then there's the Darth Vader's helmet in the Starfield of The Empire Strikes Back. it's just a cool look, because it's almost Find Darth Vader, in a way, but it's very prominent. You can tell it's Darth Vader, but it's just surrounded by this star field, and it's got the Empire Strikes Back logo on it. It was one of the original uh one sheets for them. I love that poster, and I got a replica of it, or had one hanging on my wall down in the old world. Uh, but here, like I say, there's just no wall space. I'm hoping to one day, the hope is to one day have a bigger area that is, the studio office space that has all the wall space and shelf space I need to
Yeah, I
really do
know.
what I want to do with everything. So,
Yeah. We can't all be Ryfun and have storage containers
well,
full
now
of stuff.
listen, Ryfun. Well, here's the thing. For the longest time, I did have it in storage when I first moved to North Georgia, and then when I moved into a house where I could unload everything, I did that. And at the time, I had a whole spare room that was going to be, primarily the Star Wars room. And then I got married, or was getting married, so I had to clear that out,
Sure.
and sold off a huge, huge chunk of my collection. But I'm real bad about, for everything that comes in, something goes out. I'm real bad about hoarding and keeping the stuff that I have. So I end up with just piles and boxes and stacks and that sort of thing. But I'm trying to be
I
better.
I get you 100%. Here's one other thing I want to show you.
Oh, sorry.
You can't really see, I don't know if you can
Well,
see
that's
it's
like a
3D.
shadow box kind of thing going on
Yeah,
there.
and it lights up. It's got a remote control on it.
Yeah.
But I don't have it plugged in because I'm carrying it up here. But my daughter, she loves. Actually, this is her birthday present. She won't watch, so she won't know her birthday's coming up in a few weeks. But I got this. I actually won this at the
Oh, nice.
ICCC.
Oh, wow.
It's from a company called Indecisive Squirrel. And
Hmm.
what the reason I was going to tell you about this is they make Marvel comics, the covers like this.
Oh,
So
wow.
so you could get a Thor, a Spider-Man, a whatever in a 3D art. It made all with wood, and it's of comic covers and cards, like old Marvel cards of our old Topps cards of Star Wars. They had those in 3D art like this as well. So, um,
Indecisive Squirrel. Now I'm
Indecisive Squirrel. Yeah, just they were nice.
Indecisive Squirrel 3D Labs.
Might be. I
Okay.
just know them as Indecisive Squirrel, but you'll see some of the artwork of the Marvel, Star Wars, different things like that, and it's fantastic. They had a whole display, and I actually entered a contest for that, and I said my daughter loves Nightmare Before Christmas, and sure enough, I won. So it was
Sweet.
great.
Well, I love stuff where people take old Marvel comic covers and 3D-ize them. I think
Well,
that's
you'll
something.
like these then if you
Yeah.
find it, if that's the right website right there. So I don't know if they've got an actual website or it's more of a Facebook page or what have you, but they uh, they definitely have some great
What I'm
artwork.
seeing are more fidget spinners and that sort of thing from this particular one that I found.
Yeah, yeah. We'll find it. I'll send you the link. So I'll post
Okay.
the link so people. As a matter of fact, I posted the link on Twitter. So it's actually there's a link on Twitter for Indecisive Squirrel,
Is
and
that on your Joey Marinara or
no, it's Under the Rule of
Rule
Galaxy.
Galaxy? Great.
By the way, okay, I'm going to tell you a funny story about Joey Marinara. Um, so to my older relatives, I was Joey, right? My dad was Joseph. My grandfather was Joe. He was Big Joe. Then my dad was Joe, and then I was Joseph or Joey. And then we had our son, and we named him Joseph as well, and he became Joey, and I became Joe or Joseph. And so my daughter and my son-in-law, my wife, we were talking about it, and I was like, "Oh, you guys, you'd really enjoy Steve Glosson." None of them listen to the show, just like you
Oh
know.
no. Oh no.
But I was like, you would enjoy him. He's very funny, and I said he knows a lot of stuff, but he does it in a real comedic way. It makes it a lot of fun. And I go, and you know what? Whenever things kind of go wrong, he calls me Joey Marinara and Joey whatever, and they're like, no, he doesn't. And I'm like, yes, he does. I was like, if you ever listen to the show, you'd hear that he calls me Joey, and because they were like, nobody calls you Joey, and I was like, Steve Glosson calls me Joey. And so now the joke is they'll be around me and they'll be like, talk to Steve Glosson today? No, we just checking, Joey. Just wanted to see Joey. Just wanted to see. And I'm like, great.
So I've caused a
So
schism in the family.
yeah. So
Well, I never mean to be offensive.
you're not offensive.
I
I
uh I love nicknames, and I love giving people nicknames. And especially if I don't like you, you probably don't have a nickname. Either I'm doing an impersonation of you, or I'm giving you a nickname. If I don't do an impersonation of you giving it, I probably don't like you that much or know you that well. And so and so like with Riley and Bethany Blanton, the Star Wars Report back in the
Oh
day when
yeah.
they first started. Look, they were young kids. Now
Oh
they're
yeah.
married and grown and have their own lives now. And they're wonderful. But I just called them the kids. Like I said, well, the kids are coming over. I've got a podcast with the kids. And Riley's one. I wish you wouldn't do that. And I'm like, I'm sorry, man. You're the kid. And now obviously I can't do that anymore. He's so grown up, and Riley's always been so driven and successful and everything. Like I have a ton of respect for him. But they were young, so I called them the kids. And so I end up a lot of times, um
I get it.
hitting people more than endearing them, I guess, to me.
No, no, no. It's good. I think nicknames are great. I mean, my son-in-law, who not to get into Joe time here on the Star Wars podcast, but he came in and his name's Greg, and he's a lawyer, and so he goes by either the judge or he goes by Gaylord because of meet the parents and all that.
Right,
Because
right.
so I mean, but he comes from a family where you don't do that, right? Like that's not. So when he comes into the house and four different people call him by four different nicknames, that's just how we do in the Molinaro household. So he looks, he's like, I'm just Greg. And we're like, nope, you're the judge, you're
You're the
Gaylord,
judge. Yeah,
I
yeah, for
mean, all
sure.
kinds of different things. So I mean, that's terms of endearment, right? So um, but yeah, so it look, as a recap of all this, I'm Return of the Jedi, let's face it, 40 years ago, to think that we're thinking about that. ICC Con, um, it's a great event, and I look forward to next year. And I'll definitely let you know in case you could pull it off.
Mhm.
Being in the Nashville area, not too distant from you, but I think you'd really enjoy it, and I think you would have a lot of fun with the people who are there, and heck, half of them probably know you already. The amount of Rebel Force radio shirts I saw walking around that place, I was like, okay, somebody
Oh
listens
yeah,
to
listen,
somebody.
yeah, listen, RFR. Look, I love you guys, I do.
Yeah,
But man, those guys are the guys. Like
they are.
there's no getting around it. Those guys they're the walking dog, as it were, of Star Wars podcasting. And in fact, they're the reason when I started podcasting, they're the reason I didn't do a Star Wars podcast, because I'm like, well, everything that I would do on a podcast, they're
Sure.
doing. So let me then broaden it out a little bit and geek out loud. And so there it was. So before we wrap up, I really want to quickly say, I know you were trying to start a Twitter war, an online war with Scott Ryfun and I. Um,
What?
but
Never. No.
I know you were shocked as all get out when Scott started his stuff, but you need to understand what you allowed Scott to do was absolutely come to the point where there's nothing I can say. He was so genuine and so sincere. And look, Scott is a good friend. I love Scott Ryfun and I respect him. And Scott's given me the opportunity to live out my dream. For 3 years, I was broadcasting on radio because of him. So and that's just a dream that he provided for me to be able to do, and would allow me to do it again if I had the time, and would step in and do it. But he knew what he was doing. That's not to say he didn't mean every word he said, but in meaning every word he said, he knew what he was doing to me. He was absolutely taking any ability for me to be like, anything about him. So thank you for giving Scott the final volley over the net on me.
Oh no, no,
Look, I
no.
know. Listen, I love Glosson. Glosson's a great friend. I love him, but I don't know why he's coming at me so hard. I love Glosson, and so, but yeah,
It's I listened. You had a listener send you a message the other day saying you and Steve just need to do a show all the time. While I agree with that, I also kind of like the fact that it's sporadic,
yeah,
because then it builds up, right?
right,
Like
right.
it's like every month, all of a sudden, it's just boom, Clash of
Yeah.
Titans. You got Godzilla and King Kong going at it, right? I mean, it's just
If you could see the text threads, like it really is like me just trying to give Scott a hard time, and then Shaz will kick in too. There's like a text thread between the three of us, and Shaz is just like, you don't get a kinder, more
yeah.
welcoming, nicer guy than Shaz. He's just such a good dude. Um and then Scott is Scott. Scott's so knowledgeable and so everything.
Oh,
And I'm like the child in the group that's like, well, let me just, come in here and drop a stupid joke or say something dumb or try to poke the bear, stir the hornet's nest. And I do, when I get around people like you and Scott and all this, I realize how childish I actually am.
oh no, no,
So,
no, man. Like I said, I feel completely blessed that one, that I've been doing this for 3 years now, but two, that I said it to him, to think that guys who I listened to for years and love their content would just take the time to come and actually become friends with us on our show and do the show with us. It means the world to me. So he was teasing, but at the same time he was being very sincere.
well, to be
Um,
fair, on your show, I like you and I like D Doc. I'm okay with Alfie. Brent, I'm still on the fence about.
cannot wait to hear that. But those two, all they do is poke the bear. You talk about
Right.
text
Yeah.
chains.
Yeah. That's right.
It's just Alfie throwing a lob over, Britt throwing one back, and I'm like, guys, please. I did want to finish on this though. We joked around about you meeting Jack Harvey, the IndyCar
Hmm.
driver, and I tell people all the time, and I've talked to Jack since then, and
You talking
he's
about
just
the best looking man I've ever
yeah.
been on a
I
podcast with? Yeah.
I told him that comment, and he was so embarrassed, but also just laughing
Yeah.
hysterically. He thought it was so funny. But that lucky son of a gun. I don't know if you saw the postings. Adam Driver did the green flag at the Indy
Wow.
500.
Yeah.
Before the 500, he and Jack Harvey got to sit down and meet and talk Star Wars.
Nice. Wow. And
Yeah.
Harvey talked Star Wars with him?
Yes. He
You're
showed him
kidding
his
me.
he showed him his Star Wars racing helmet. He signed it.
Oh, well,
So
I mean, like, did Harvey know that like Adam has some
um,
mixed history with?
I think so. But it's that British voice. He
Yeah,
probably was able
that's
to
true.
smooze it right
Well,
over and
also, he's not just some weird fan running up. Like, he's one of the racers and he's there. I get it,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
man, I tell you what, that dude that was fun, and I was just sitting there like, what am I even doing on this show right now? Why am I even here? This is ridiculous.
Oh
And
man.
then in a panic, what do? I pull out the most offensive trading card in the world, and I just keep going back to that. That's not good. That's not wise.
Oh,
That's not a morally upstanding individual in the community. That's someone who's like, let me keep making the lowest common denominator joke.
people love it, and people loved you. It was
Well,
great. So I appreciate it. And you know what? One day I'm gonna have you get to an IndyCar race and sit down and talk Star Wars with Jack, and just be like, okay, I'm gonna melt now because I'm getting this British accent talking Star Wars to me. But I actually did bring Jack up to Ian McDermott.
yeah.
He and I were talking about things and being in Indianapolis, and I said,
Mhm.
I'm going home to watch the Indianapolis 500, and a British racer is in it, and we're very good friends, and he's a big fan of you and Star Wars. And he looked at me and he goes, really? And I said, yeah. I go, do you ever watch the 500? He's like, not really. And I said, well, you should. I said, Jack would love to know that you're cheering for him because, he
Yeah, yeah.
British guy in Star Wars. And he was like, I will look into it. And I thought, that's pretty cool. So I told Jack, I said, the Emperor's on your side. So, go out and do your best. But anyway, yeah, Steve, look, I appreciate you always taking the time. You're a
Yeah,
good
man.
friend,
I love
and
it. I enjoy it.
I think we had
Hey,
some good talks here. So
indeed, indeed,
yeah,
indeed. I'm a better podcast guest than I am a texter. So there you go.
don't worry about that, man. I will pester you until you finally answer.
You're
Um,
welcome to do so. I'm glad you do.
yeah, that's what sales guys do. We pester people until they say yes or no. So, you go have a great day. Thanks
You
so
too,
much
man. Thank you.
for all of our listeners. Everything. Hey, it was Steve Glosson. You know it's going to be a good show. Hopefully you get a chance to check this one out. Until next week, may the force be with you.